Okay, well, good morning, everybody. And there's a lot of extremely familiar faces here. I usually used to hate giving presentations and standing up in front of groups of people, but when it's about Porsche, I always really look forward to it. So this year, although the Carrera GT is sitting here, we have a presentation. We thought, well, what are we going to do? And I said, what about the 997? 997 was it introduced in 2004? Anyway, it's like 20 years, the 997, kind of like a pivotal point in Porsche when we finally had money to develop things a little bit further along to a higher level. There's a lot of compromise with the 986 and 997, but I call it "and other stories." And the other stories are a couple of things I dug up that are sort of related to the 997, but I wouldn't know how to fit those in, so I just stuck them in here.
Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications by clicking on the bell icon and never miss a video. We've got lots of Porsche content coming your way.
As much as I love driving the Porsche, I usually take the Mazda, and I also review a lot of cars every year. Now, the Porsche has the Escort Redline Max 360C with the M2 Smart Dashcam set up in it already. I don't like swapping it between cars because I have to realign that whole package. So fortunately, the sponsor of this video, Escort Radar, has sent us the Escort Max 4, which has become my go-to radar and laser detector for swapping in between cars. So it's easy as setting up your suction connector here, which is magnetic, it'll hold real well, and then attaching the power cord just like on any other radar detector. And then after a second, it turns on. The M2 Smart Dashcam can also be paired with the Max 4 radar detector.
Caution, speed camera ahead.
Protect your drive. Visit escortradar.com today.
So I actually have an agenda, but we'll fly over that because we started late. But who am I? I mean, for those who don't know, or maybe never saw one of my presentations, I'm American, born in Billings, Montana, but spent most of the upbringing in Wisconsin. Studied industrial design at a college called Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design. Had a really interesting job at a company called Brooks Stevens Associates, a pioneer industrial designer. And in 1980, I was what do you call it? They don't say fired, you're let go. So it's out of a job. Great. So career's off to a great start. I went freelance in the Milwaukee area for a while to the point where I was working on a project called a liquid waste incinerator. So this is industrial design. And I never even really listened to the name never really paid attention to what this thing was, but I was going to make it look really good. So I design this really good-looking liquid waste incinerator and spent a lot of time getting the portions and the colors and the finishes. And I thought, what the hell am I doing? What am I doing here? So I quit. Quit that freelance thing. That didn't go so well. Making money, but hey, I think there was a little bit more potential. So left the Milwaukee area and went to work for Texas Instruments in the consumer electronics part for a while. And then realized that was a time when the whole industry was kind of like down in the dumps. And decided to drop all that stuff, sell my VW Scirocco, and pay tuition at the Art Center College of Design. And that's what basically sort of really turned things around. So after that, I went to Audi for 3 years. And after 3 years there, I thought, well, let's attack a real challenge, join Porsche, where there's nothing going on. There was no new cars. There was potential, but there was nothing going on. And the best thing was, what? You're going to Porsche? So what does a designer do at Porsche? And I said, well, I heard it's going to be pretty good, so just wait. So that was all a good thing. Anyway, flash forward to right now. It's my current title is called Director of Special Vehicles. I'm actually kind of like working part-time. I was supposed to retire last year, and I arranged a deal where I continue. So it's just extended, which is a good thing because the projects are so damn good. I wouldn't know what to do if I went into retirement except to, finish my 356 and Myers-Mann. So that's another story. And the projects with the Sonderwunsch thing, if you ever saw a presentation on that, it's really cool, really cool. But this time the focus is a little bit on the 997. Yeah, okay, I have 3 daughters and I have a lot of air-cooled VWs and a lot. I don't know, 6. Porsches, I love 356s. And I have 3, meanwhile 4 Boxsters. And one of them is because I got this super low mile one. I would have to sell another one. So there's a Boxster S out there for sale. But this isn't a place to sell cars. Let's just talk about 997. Okay, moving forward. Yeah, this is like a quick project overview of all the stuff that I've done after doing like Boxster show car, production car, the 997, Carrera GT, together with Tony Hatter, wherever he is. We're going to talk about a little bit about that later. I wandered off into the, kind of like the derivative area with the like the Targa and stuff like that. A little bit of work on the early Panamera. A lot of derivatives, and including these guys here. And the derivatives wandered off in the direction of how do you say, the exclusive department. We'll talk about that later because one of the very first exclusive cars to kick off that whole program was based on the 997. Yeah, and here's a couple other things, and things got really exciting. How to make something out of nothing. There's just, with a little bit of motivation and dedication, you can find ways, after being at Porsche a long time, to make things happen. So that's a couple of these cars, and very rare cars, sometimes some one-offs, sometimes we wish we could have produced, sometimes not, but whatever, can't do everything. Then, of course, I have spent a lot of time on our Classic Club Coupe, which I think everyone knows, a really cool car. And, of course, the GT3R Rennsport that was introduced at Rennsport Reunion last year was the last big bang, and there's more coming, I'm never going to retire. But it starts somewhere. This is a sketch I did. The Dodge Charger was brand new. I love that car. I actually bought one a couple of years ago and sold it after having it for 3 years because the childhood dream back then was, I fulfilled that as I move forward. The cool thing about it is that the VW Bug in the middle is passing the Olds 442 and the Charger RT, kind of a hint at where my future might go. Anyway, so now we're on the 997. Before I wanted to say something before. It's not a monologue here. You can interrupt any time. Don't even raise your hand. Just yell out a question. I'm fine with that. Because I always like to see it sort of like an interaction. So yeah, the 997 had a real funny kind of an upbringing. So if you go way back, I just want to touch on something that we've never shown before. When I was looking for all the 997 stuff that we had done, we like packed it away in these flat files. We thought we'll never, and then we moved studios and there's still in these flat files. And one day at work, I had one of my Boxsters at work and I just threw it all in the trunk and I brought it home and completely forgot about it. And I thought, well, where is that stuff? So I go to my workshop with another friend of mine. We're changing a fuel pump on a Boxster and opened the trunk and there's all these things. I thought, what? Well, that's where those things are. Started opening them up and there was all the documentation on the 997 and the 989 and the 944 facelift I worked on and a couple of other things. I thought, well, that's where that stuff is, in the trunk of the Boxster. So when we first started out, let me see how to go about doing this. So you might know the 989. So I left Audi, a front-engine four-door company, to go to Porsche to do sports cars, and the first car was a front-engine four-door Porsche, the 989. And so I thought, well, okay, we'll get going on that. And then we had the 944, and then eventually the 968, and the 928, and a very old 911. So Porsche is going to revamp the whole thing. And so they came up with this idea of the 989. But the 989 had to have platform sharing with another car, and that was called the 996. I call it the 9961 because the 9962 was the one that was paired with the Boxster later. So they just called it Project 996. And it was almost like a standalone 911 successor with a lot of carryover parts from the 989, like a rear engine, like an engine, I don't want to say rear engine, a rear mid-engine V8 from the 989. And that was going to be the new 911. So that was called 996, and there was no 986, it was 996. So we did this drawing, before we did all the sketches and stuff like that, knowing that, especially the top middle sketch, I still really kind of like, but that was the formal language at the time, all round and stuff. Things got kind of tightened up a little bit later on, but when I did that car, I realized it was a really short rear end, and you'll notice that some of these images have a Polaroid format. And the Polaroid format is the only documentation we have of this stuff, because we weren't allowed to take any photographs of all of our stuff. If you had to do it, it was a lot of trouble. You get a photographer in, sign some papers, and he takes the photographs, and then you never see the photographs again. So I was sneaking around with this Polaroid camera, documenting. But this is a full-size airbrush rendering. It's what you do is you tape it out on a full-size wall, and you airbrush it in. This was before the days of digital, of course, power wall and stuff like that. It's just a big giant drawing from there to there, full-size car. So then they started. It's like I was sort of like half involved in this project, working on this 989, and then there's a date on this 9th of March 1990 of the drawing, and they started building a model of this car. I said, "Oh, let's build it as a model." And there was a couple other ones, but it was just a real undefined time. Most of the focus was on the 989. So we built this model, and it was still called a 996. And the reason I had to turn the Polaroid camera is to fill up the maximum frame. It's this big. And then scanned it in, actually works out pretty good. You can see it's called, the license plate says 996 on it. And then we made, up at the top there, we made a little fiberglass model, and I remember Harm, the guy, my boss at the time, he goes, "Hey, hurry up and finish that model. We're going to cast it off." Cast it off. People come, it goes off somewhere, and they put fiberglass molds all over it, and it comes back as a hard model. He said, "We're going to hurry up and finish that. We're going to cast it." What do you mean? It's not ready yet. So we rushed to kind of like get it half finished. It was really rough, and it wasn't symmetrical or anything. It's like, well, let's see what happens. So then it disappeared, but there's a lot of stuff in that car that eventually led on to like later 996s, 997s, and Boxsters and stuff like that. So that model disappeared, and I've never seen it again. Nobody knows about it. Nobody recalls this program. But I found the stuff in the trunk of my Boxster. Heading back to this full-size tape drawing. So in 1998, it was a 50th year Porsche anniversary. And we were instructed in the design department, everyone had to give like performances or presentations. We had this idea, well, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to do a tape drawing of a car, a future car, maybe like a visionary 911, on the stage in front of dignitaries. We had politics people, Wendell and Wiedeking right in front of us, the Porsche family, tennis player Steffi Graf, and all kinds of really well-known German personalities for this presentation. And our job was to do visionary 911 with this tape in front of them in around 8 minutes. So we teamed up, and I sketched out this car for it, what it could look like. Keeping in mind that it's 1998, we weren't even starting I think we're starting on the facelift. Tony might remember that. Where'd he go? The facelift of the 996. In 1998, the 996 was brand new. So as soon as the car comes out, you start working on the facelift right away. And that was so it's 1998, trying to get my dates here right. This was, the facelift hasn't even existed yet. So we thought we'd do a visionary 911. If you look at it closely, it's basically the 997. But I didn't know that at the time. I was just sketching out something sort of. Anyway, so we laid it out in a little bit of a format to look like, black and white, how they do these tape drawings, and then you add a little bit of airbrush. And we assembled a team with myself, Tony, Steve Merkett, Pinky Lion, Ranjit, the other 5 designers, and we painted this thing live on the stage in the camera, tripping over camera and cables and airbrushes and paint cans and stuff, and tape, and basically finished this drawing in 8 minutes. And it went really fast, and we were running around, tripping over each other, and it was really kind of a cool thing. And the car that came out of it was basically the 997, and I didn't know that until I dug this stuff out of the trunk of the Boxster. So then we did a test drawing of that The test drawing I found in the corner of my workshop just a couple weeks ago. I thought, well, I'm going to move the car, roll it out, then take a picture of it. So that's basically what it looked like. It looks a bit distorted. So the test drawings we did, there's like two or three of them, just to see if it could be done and then how fast we could do it without tripping over each other. And I forgot that I saved it. And the funny thing about it is that, and then we signed it all, we test signed, everyone signed it, and then later on in the real one, they signed, all these dignitaries also signed it. So then I made this funny calculation. We did it in 8 minutes. It was sold for 125,000 live at this event to a guy that for a good cause. So we brought in 125,000 Deutschmarks back then, which is 65,000 euro, which is $70,000, and it comes out to $146 per second. Per second. We earned on that drawing for a good cause. Whatever the good cause, I don't know. So it's just one of those funny things. Anyway, so then we had this. Any questions so far? While I sip my coffee. It was in the back. It's wider. It's called A2 size. So unfortunately, we don't do that much anymore. We don't have a lot of drawings laying around. It's like print, to do it digitally and you print it out, and then it's like, it doesn't have that same kind of character. But every now and then for special customers, we'll still do a real sketch, real analog, and give them away as presents and stuff. So very rare though. Then we had this program. So now it's like really time to start with the 997. And we had this, Harm Lagai, the chief designer at the time, had this vision. He said he wants to have a California studio just like everyone else. So every company had a studio somewhere in the world. California, there's some in Como, there's some in Japan. And it's like, well, Porsche, like studio, you design Porsches in California? Well, California is kind of a place where you're a little bit more open-minded. A lot of customers there, a lot of Porsches on the roads. So how cool would that be to have a studio there? So to get our feet wet in that idea, it was my idea. I think it was. But anyway, Harm, the guy, wanted to open the studio. And I said, well, let's do these models. Let's do a advanced program with the 911 successor. This advanced program was you leave the studio, you leave the country, you go to California. And it is a stupid idea. And then Harm goes, well, that's a great idea. I always wanted a design studio in California. So to get our feet wet, we did that. We did a little 6-month test program. And I still, to this day, cannot believe that the board of directors or the development chief accepted that. We just like packed up everything, 3 people, me, a designer, and the 987 designer, and one of our really talented sculpture models. Keeping in mind, computers didn't really exist at that time, at least not for design. And off to a 6-month business trip we went. And then we rented a studio, and the studio was a lot bigger than it was in Weissach, and we had nothing else to do except to focus on these cars. So we thought we had a lot of freedom. So we're working and doing all this stuff, and I referred back to that car that we did on the stage, the full size, and I let that influence me a little bit, and it sort of looked a little bit like this. And the top one was it was never going to look like that, I know that, but we wanted to have this little air scoop on the back, referring to the fact that it's a rear-engine car. Just how far can you deviate from make a futuristic 911 without going too far? How revolutionary. And we did all these studies, also found in the trunk of my car. We had this evolution and revolution. And we're really struggling with the revolution ones. You look at it, and you do a revolutionary sketch of the 911, that stuff looked awful. But it didn't look awful. It was like, no. And then, so, of course, it's going to be evolutionary, as the 911 always is. And then we had the full freedom to almost do I don't say whatever we want, where there's no engineers looking over our back, at least at the beginning. So a couple months later, we're I don't know, exchanging data on sticks, or we're mailing photographs through snail mail back and forth. Fax. We were faxing information back and forth. This is a real fax car. And so eventually they said, you're going too far with it. We're going to carry over a lot with the 996. So there's no way that Porsche would ever. If you look at the 911, started out introduced in 1963, designed in 1959, then went all the way up to 1998. The same basic platform. If you do a brand new car with a 996, throw it all out, do another brand new car with a 997. No way. But we got new doors, and new parts. But the whole basic body in white, as they call it, that was all 100% carryover. So all this visionary stuff was getting pulling back a little bit. And actually, we got in a lot of trouble from the development chief later on that we went too far. But anyway, so we worked on these cars feverishly. It was basically a project that we started in October with the first sketches, and we were supposed to end up with a final see-through we call it hard model, a fiberglass cast car. See-through means that you can see through it, but you can't sit in it. The doors don't open. Just a design model. In 6 months with 2 cars. And that was, so what initially started off as our sort of like visionary future 911 turned out to be reduced down to a real viable, logical step for the 996 successor. Yeah. So there's these models. There was to make the story even spicier. You can't see it in here, probably for compliance reason. I bought a 356 SC from European Collectibles for $11,500. And while I was during the day working on this car, right around 7-8 p.m. I stopped, turned around and worked on that 356. It was right there in the studio, taking all apart in the whole design room where we had our desks, no computers, desks. It was half full with 356 parts. So you had to do something. I told my wife, and she wasn't so excited about the fact of a 6-month business trip, but there was a lot of travel back and forth. And how do you say, that kind of kept me out of trouble. So I'd be out eating tacos, drinking tequila every night, but I had that 356 to work on. And I still have it. My very first Porsche. Yeah.
The 993 had the classic headlights, the 996 got one headlight we all know, and then kind of went in a different direction, and obviously the 997 went back. And
yeah.
they were involved in all those designs. There was some great behind that.
How do I repeat that question? Well, basically the question is about the headlamp philosophy and how we went from 993, 996, 996 facelift, 997, and beyond. So I'll try to, does that sound like, how do I answer? A lot of nodding heads there. Great. So when that's an ongoing subject of headlamps that never goes away. But it's kind of a good thing, because anytime we're anywhere explaining that, the question always pops up, and you're always, it's of course it's a different group. It's like, oh, not that question again. Of course it's a question again, because it's a real question, and because you didn't ask it you weren't around the last time it was asked, so we answer it again. So in the case of the whole with the 986 and the 996, if you look at the initial sketches of both cars, all the headlamps are always round. It's like there's no alternative. All the headlamps are always going to be round. The Boxster had to look for a different alternative with, if you go back to other Porsches, you have a headlamp, you have a blinker, and you have other lamps. They don't want that because we were struggling to even exist. So every department had to look for compromises. So the design studio, together with the electric people, lighting development is outrageously expensive. We couldn't get suppliers to want to work with us. I think suppliers not going to make headlamps for a car. We're selling cars, 15,000, 17,000 cars a year. And it's all the models back then. It was like nothing. And then, they needed volume to, for them to make a profit. So like Porsche, it's like a dying company. And it's like, it was a real big struggle to get like Bosch and Hella to work with us. So we came up with this idea with a singular unit where all the functions, one unit, not only for all the functions, but also the installation of it. If you ever saw, that was credit to Dr. Wiedeking at that time. It came from a production background. He everything was about production line speed, because in that case, time is real money. And the faster you can put a car together, the more things move along, it's more profitable. It just costs a lot of money to produce a car. So so that was like super important. For that reason, the a little bit offshoot here on the side, the 996 and 986 have like big wide cut lines. It's like it's a lot easier to put a car together that goes together fast. You just you don't install the parts, you just bang them on, bolt them down, and then hope that they fit. The bigger the gaps are, you don't notice it. You don't notice how bad the tolerances are. So big gaps. That we wanted to change with the 997. We had this thing called precision and clarity and all these buzzwords. We're going to take what we did with the 996 and 986 and vastly improve the perceived quality of all the parts. But by that time we had a lot more money. So back to the headlamp thing. So the 986 got this lamp, which is based on the show car. There was a very enthusiastic guy in electric. He was so enthusiastic and so convincing that this was the way to go. There was like no stopping him. And it was a good thing because it made a really big difference in the survival. So when so that was a 986. And the 996, we're doing parallel. We have identical doors, identical front bonnets, identical windshield geometry with the lower windscreen of the Boxster, and for a while, identical bumpers. So we changed that at the last minute. Boxster got its own bumper. And then, but at that time of all this commonality parts, the 911, 996 still had round headlamps. And then as things weren't moving along, it's like, it was like, bam, then it hit. It's like, well, we have something to tell you. We're going to have to put the Boxster headlamp on the 996. And I'm going like, oh, that 996 designer, he's not going to like that. And he didn't, because he's worked out the whole front end of his car. That's his name, Pinky Lai, Hong Kong Chinese character. And a lot of credit to him for being very, very creative with what he had to work with. We just had to make a lot of compromise within those two cars, and he had to take over our, because not mine, our 986 headlamp. So anyway, that whole commonality between those two models was tough. It was a tough pill to swallow. And people even say today, they see a car, driving along, see a Boxster in their rearview mirror catching up to them, it drives by and it's a 996. It's just the compromise we made at the time. Now, now up to 1998, 1999, with the, I thought, well, we're not going to do anything. First of all, you get the cars separate from each other. So, but we managed, I cannot believe that, we managed to squeeze out new doors, new bonnets, both common between the 987 and 997. Identical roof geometry between the 996, so none of that cab forward stuff and, the real expensive stuff, that we didn't get. But we got a lot of other new parts and different headlamps. So first of all, different headlamps. It was only logical to go back and do round headlamps. But just not any round headlamp. We put them, proportionately adjusted them in the car, and spent a lot of time working on the insides. The earlier headlamps always had a lot of, what's that, Rifflung texture and refractive elements inside there. Well, now everything was completely clear, so we spent a lot of time designing the innards, the insides of the headlamps to make them really have a much more perceived quality feel and make them really look cool. So at the beginning, a big compromise, tough for everyone. Company saving decisions that we when the money that we made to get back into a healthy position, we were able to use to bring the two cars separate from each other again. Is that pretty close? Yeah.
996.2 headlamp intentional differentiate from the box?
Well, that's an interesting question because, first of all, the Boxster facelift, let me think. I got you there. Yep. Oh, repeat the question. I thought you were saying, hurry up. Let's see. So was the 9962 the second generation headlamp?
Intentional differentiate from box.
Let's see. What happened there was the 996 second generation headlamp intentionally done that way to differentiate it from the Boxster. So I got through that one. Thumbs up from Boo. Let's see, as far as what I can follow there back then, that was Pinky Lie, same designer did that car. So the headlamps that when you do a second generation, you change things. So that was yes. The answer to that question was yes, to differentiate from the Boxster. The Boxster, let's see, the first thing generation. So the Boxster second generation kept its headlamps. Wasn't enough money to do all of that. And then started off with, didn't the Turbo first get those headlamps? And it filtered through with the rest of the 996s. And then our development chief, who I have to be careful how I say this, who not such didn't really care that much about design. Everything had to work and had to sell, had to be on time. Of course, you got designers need people like that looking over their shoulders so as things move. He basically wanted that. He said, "Well, let's try these turbo headlamps. We take that, and it's only a logical step to also put that in the Boxster." And I think, "Oh God!" So we put these 996 second generation lamps on the Boxster. Tried that out for about like half a day. Said, "No, we're not doing that. Not doing that." But since we're focused a little bit more on 997, so round headlamps. I don't know. No, it was just for me the logical thing. That's it. We're just doing round headlamp. Back to round headlamp. Back to the roots. And it turns out that the whole front geometry of the car, it's like a modernized version of a 993 from Tony Hatter. Where's Tony? Talk about that later. And not unintentional, just because of it's like when you realize you go too far in one direction, you always have to kind of come home, touch base before you run off in the other direction. So that was what we wanted to do, is to kind of see how far you go, and you realize maybe went too far, or maybe it's the right thing. I don't know. I think the whole thing about the fried egg headlamps, I think I'm really getting used to them. Oh, we had one guy. He's doing one of these extremely expensive, very special one-offs based on. Be careful if I divulge too much information here. Based on a second generation 996, and he wanted to make a lot of changes to it. One of the changes, he said, he'd like to put the fried egg headlamps from the very first 911 on his facelifted, like Boxster fried egg headlamp on his 911. I'm going like, what? Okay. And I said, why? Yeah, you can do that if you want. It's Sonderwunsch. You dream it, we build it. And then he said a key factor. He said that was the 911 that came out in the market when he was a little boy. That was for him the new 911. Anything else before that is just old stuff. That was it, and what sort of impregnated his brain as a child. And that's how he wanted to have the headlamps in the car. Eventually went off to staying with the second generation lamps. But I thought it was really interesting from a different standpoint. The younger generation looks at these cars from a completely different standpoint. Anyway, so I'll get through this here. So we have time for questions again. Yeah, so anyway, so there's the final model we did. Now when I look at it, I think, okay, there's some improvements to be done, but we did it in 6 months, and the design process was like super short. Because one part of the design is it's almost like the first idea, the execution takes forever, especially if it's a hard model, and especially your deadline April 1st when was that? 1999, had to be done. I went through all kinds of compromise. I went to a Toyota dealership and bought the tail lamps from the Toyota, Toyota Solara, and took the insides out and put them in this model because we wanted to have transparent lenses and we wanted to see the stuff inside there. So we had instead of prototyping that stuff, you just buy parts from other cars. So that was a Toyota Solara in there. But yeah, I'm getting to that. The question was, did that model have a hatch? So on the upper right, it says here, rear hatch with visible engine. So we had this idea, the idea was a hatch, excuse me, that not only facilitated a better loading of, kind of Cayman-like, excuse me, but under that hatch, there's an idea from these advanced engineering guys that you open that, and then you open this secondary hatch, just like a Boxster or Cayman, and there's an engine right there. And that would have been so cool, but that was shot down solely for the reason of torsional stiffness of the whole body. You take a stiff shell of anything, whether it's an egg or a watermelon, 9/11 shell, and cut a big piece out, it gets wobbly. So we abandoned that idea. So otherwise it had that faster windshield. We called it cast cab forward. We put the mirrors on the door because we thought it's more motorsport-like. You can, it opens up the glass area a little bit and it gets it less like small car-like. And we did these hollow spoke wheels. The 993 had these really cool hollow spoke wheels. And I thought we'd do the same thing, but visible hollow spoke, so the air goes through them. They turned out kind of heavy looking, and that eventually led to the so-called lobster claw, as they call it here. And eventually, I didn't do the lobster claw, but this was influenced by the air thing, and then the lobster claw was taken over by someone else. And then, like I said here, substantial improved perception quality. So everyone tighten up the cut lines and everything, make the car look like what they cost back then, $90,000, I don't remember, and just use the money that we finally made to invest more in this car. Let's see what else we got here. Yes, so then we also did Cabriolet versions. This is, I think, partial Photoshop. Now you can slowly see Photoshop creeping into our project. So it was a real nice tool to speed things up and visualize things. It's not what we got. Not what we got. We eventually, by carrying over the whole cabin of the 996, we also had to carry it over the whole convertible top. Always compromises. Yeah, and there was a final version, just as we expected it. And it's funnily enough that the car, if you walk around it, there's a lot of differences between it and the 997 and the 996. Put them side by side, and you blur your eyes. You don't see the differences. So it's a real 3D thing. You gotta walk around it. And there's a lot of changes. We do things to make the overhangs look shorter in the right places and longer in other places. We did some tweaks on the roof. A couple of millimeters here and there in the right place makes a big difference in making substantial changes.
Frank, you showed that on purpose, the real wiper on the 996.
No, I did not intentionally pick a photo with a rear wiper on it. But to be honest, you're the only one that noticed that. I didn't notice that, and I put this thing together. Good point. Yeah, and then parallel to that, or shortly after that, we started on the turbo. And I was eventually, it was kind of like a logical thing. If you do the base car, you also do the turbo, but then we had some other people involved, so I'm not the designer of the final turbo. I always call it like 85%. We had couple different versions of it. So I wanted to like hark back a little bit to these rear spoilers that really sort of like substantially like make the turbo really sort of more imposing from the rear. It's going to get wider fenders anyway. This is a really rough Photoshop in the early days of Photoshop. And it turned out that it tamed itself down to something like this. integrated. It's almost like a really wide ducktail, and side scoop. A little bit of, I think it's still all Photoshop. Some of them we modeled, and it turned out that there was another variation of the spoiler, and so I did the big spoiler and a sort of like integrated sort of motorsport like side intake, and the front had this fin in the front, so we had the fin as a blinker. There was this point in time where LEDs were coming into play, and I thought, well, let's put a fin inside the front intake, and we'll put LED lamps in there. And it actually worked. It got a little bit thicker than what we wanted it, but the integration of newer technology made a big difference. And the funny thing is that trick with this. Well, thank you. The trick with the that blinker turned into a patent, which earned me about 80 Deutschmarks or euro per year because of a technical patent based on how many cars they produced. A couple cents. Like 80 euro a year or something. And the thing of what it was is you have this 30-degree, it's a real stupid technical thing you have to fulfill. 30-degree pendulum hits the front of the car. The first point of contact determines the rest of the architecture of the areas behind it. Is how they position that pendulum. So we put that point very far inside, where that blinker is sort of like sticking through. And that's where the pendulum hit for the first time, and it allowed us a lot more freedom in the rest of the car. And then one of the engineers saw it, he goes, "Oh, you should patent that." I said, "Okay." So we patented it, and then so it was a good thing. They kept using it in other cars in the other Porsches in the future. Yeah. So anyway, so that's that spoiler that never made it, and the guy that won the spoiler and side intake, Matthias is his name, in the black shirt. No, that was me in the black shirt, in the orange shirt. So I like the 85% turbo designer. That's right. And the whole thing about the rear spoiler, funny about the rear spoilers, is that mine were too big and too dominant. And they said, from a marketing standpoint, the 911 turbo is more like it's an elegant sports car. It's a different category. It's like the higher level. They don't want a GT car. They want something a little more elegant. So we toned that down. Yeah, and that's that turbo. So I got 6 more minutes. Ooh. This is something you've never seen before. This is the Targa in a classic sense that we based on the 997. So we had this advanced development stuff going on, a future roof strategy, and one of the things a guy came up with was bring back the old Targa. And I think, wow, Targa. The Targa's kind of a cool car, but it's real boxy when you look at it from the side, and the bar is really high. It looks really cool on a 911, but will it work on this car? So we styled the hell out of this thing and tried to get it to work. And the advanced engineering guys made it work. So we got it to work visually. Everyone's like totally convinced about it. But we were too late in the 997's program to be able to produce it enough and sell enough before like cutoff point, and the 997 before the 991 came. So we took everything we learned on there and applied it to the 991, some of which didn't work, and then that's how the Targa came. It started with the 997. Same mechanism. We did that was a good point. Oh, was it a same mechanism as a 991? It's like fully electric, or lift-off parts like the old Targa? We did both. And these two parts, the original Targa, based on the F model, is really flat. The roof is really flat, so you can fold it. Bring them together. Targa, everyone knows the Targa. And then find a place to stow it. This thing, because there's so much curvature in it, and because the space from the windshield header back to the Targa bar itself was, there's a lot of curvature in there. So you take those two parts off with all that curvature, they just took up a lot of space. There was no place for those parts in there. They almost, with a lot of compromises and some funny lines, we managed to fit them in the trunk. But then, is that Porsche, everyday usability? So then they said, oh, we'll go fully electric with it, because Porsche customers these days, they don't want to get out and do all this stuff. They want to press a button and the thing comes on. I said, I'm not so sure about that. I'm not so sure. I mean, if you look at the first generation Boxster Spider, people are willing to assemble and disassemble, like model kits. So that went fully electric, and that's what won, and that's what ended up with the 991 Targa. This is a really good-looking car. I really like this. Yeah, and of course, what we never could do with the 996 with all these derivatives, we had enough development money. We did a Speedster, and then, a couple of GT cars. This is something that eventually turned into another car. These cars I did not work on, but it opened up our program with the GT3, GT3 RSs, and of course our race cars. But a pivotal point with Porsche exclusive started based on a 997, with a clever idea from, if anyone knows Boris Oppenbrink, a young guy back in 2008, 9. He said, let's do a special edition car based on the 997 and we'll bring back the ducktail. And say, oh, and there's another guy coming with all this retro stuff. You know, designers are always sort of thinking in the future. So that started with it. And now it's like a legendary, really super special car. 250 cars we built of them, and really kicked off the whole special edition and Sonderwunsch thing. The end.
All right, thank you.